The sun was just rising when the school auditorium doors opened. The sound of laughter filled the room. Teenagers talked, laughed, checked their phones. No one noticed the old man who walked in. His back was a little bent. His steps were slow. He wore an old cap and a faded jacket. He quietly sat down in the last row. The students kept talking. They didn't know who he was. But the teacher at the front, she froze. She knew. She had seen that face once, in an old newspaper clipping, and on a dusty trophy in the school's storage room. She whispered to herself, "It can't be. That's Coach Darryl." 25 years ago, Darryl Hayes was the pride of his town. He wasn't just good at sports, he was great. Fastest sprinter, strongest athlete, sharp mind, pure heart. He broke records. Coaches from big universities followed him. Some said he'd be in the Olympics. Some said he'd go pro. The whole town believed it. "This boy's going to put our town on the map," they said. His face was everywhere, on posters, magazines, even cereal boxes. Kids wanted to be like him. Adults bragged, "We know Darryl. He's one of us." The shocking decision. But just 1 month before a national-level championship, Darryl walked into a press room. He looked calm, but serious. He took the mic and said, "I'm stepping away from professional sports." The reporters went silent. One finally asked, "Why? Are you injured?" Darryl shook his head. "No, I've made a choice. I'm going back to my town. To teach, to coach kids who don't have anyone." Gasps, confusion, anger. "Are you crazy?" One coach shouted. "Do you know what you're giving up?" Another asked. But Darryl just smiled softly. "Glory is good, but giving is better." The town reacts. At first, people thought it was a joke. Then they thought he was being noble. But when the dust settled, opinions changed. He's wasting his gift. He gave up everything for nothing. Just another fool. They forgot all he had done. To them, he became the athlete who quit. A new life, a hard start. Darryl returned to the same school he once studied in. But this time, as a sports coach. The gym was broken. The field was dry. There were no balls, no shoes, no jerseys. The students didn't care about sports. They didn't believe in dreams. They were tired, angry, poor, forgotten. But Darryl didn't complain. He cleaned the gym himself, bought cheap equipment with his own money, and started showing up every single day. "Let's run," he'd say with a smile. Even when only 2 kids came. Even when it rained. Slow change. Weeks passed, then months. More students started joining. They didn't just learn how to run or throw. They learned discipline, respect, teamwork, and most of all, they learned to believe in themselves. One boy stopped getting into fights. A girl who never spoke started leading the team. Kids began showing up early just to talk to Coach Darryl. He never shouted. He never bragged. He just listened, taught, and believed. But the school board didn't see trophies. They didn't see medals. They only saw numbers, and they didn't like what they saw. Cut off and forgotten. One cold winter morning, Darryl was called to the office. "We're cutting the sports program," they said. No funding, no results. He nodded quietly, packed his small office, left his whistle on the desk. No one gave him a farewell. No newspaper wrote about it. Just like that, the champion who once had the world at his feet walked away again. But this time, no one noticed. Back to the present. In the school auditorium, the event was starting. It was his Student Achievement Day. Speeches, songs, awards. But behind it all, an old man watched silently. A student leaned toward her friend and whispered, "Who's that?" The friend shrugged. "Dunno. Maybe someone's grandpa." But the teacher knew, and as she walked toward the mic, her voice trembled as she said, Before we begin, I want to recognize someone very special. Someone who once gave up everything. For students like you. She turned and looked at the back row. Coach Darrell, thank you for coming back. The auditorium fell silent. Students turned, eyes widened, and somewhere, a memory began to wake. When Coach Darrell started teaching, most people thought he wouldn't last. The school had no sports budget, no proper gym, and no working equipment. The field was hard and dry. The bleachers were broken. And the students, they were just trying to survive. Some came from homes filled with shouting. Some hadn't eaten breakfast in days. Some had never even seen a real football game in person. They didn't care about trophies. They didn't care about teamwork. And they definitely didn't care about some old man trying to coach them. But Coach Darrell never gave up. Show up anyway. Every morning, Darrell came early. He'd sweep the gym floor, patch up old balls, and tape broken shoes. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't ask for applause. When only 2 students showed up for the first practice, he smiled and said, 2 is enough to start something great. One of those students, Jamal, later said, he looked at us like we were already champions, even when we couldn't run a single lap. More than just sports. Coach Darrell taught more than how to dribble or sprint. He taught respect, shaking hands before and after every game. He taught discipline, being on time, finishing what you start. He taught kindness, helping teammates even when you lost. One day, a student named Maria threw her shoes in frustration. She screamed, "I'm not good enough." Coach Darrell picked up the shoes and quietly said, "Neither was I, until someone believed in me." He never raised his voice. He never punished with anger. He corrected with care, changing one life at a time. Slowly, word spread. A boy who was always in trouble, Darius, suddenly stopped skipping class. He started running track and became faster every week. A shy girl named Aisha, who never talked in class, suddenly became the captain of the basketball team. Every kid who joined Coach Darrell's team felt something new. Hope. Not because they won games. In fact, they lost many. But because, for the first time, someone saw them as more than their grades, their clothes, or their broken homes. Sacrifice behind the scenes. Coach Darrell never talked about money. But the truth was, he was struggling. He used his savings to buy soccer balls and uniforms. He skipped meals so he could buy water bottles for the team. He walked to school in the rain because he couldn't afford gas. Once, the janitor saw him sleeping in the locker room. When asked why, Darrell simply said, "The kids need someone who stays." No one knew. He never asked for help. Because to him, they were his family. The board didn't understand. One day, the school board held a meeting. They looked at numbers. No championships. No state trophies. No funding from sponsors. One man on the board asked, "What has this man really achieved?" They didn't see the falling fights in the hallways. They didn't see the rise in student attendance. They didn't see kids going home smiling for the first time in years. They only saw what fit in boxes and graphs. Rumors begin. Some teachers started whispering, "He means well, but he's wasting his time. These kids aren't going anywhere. Why sacrifice your life for a few street kids?" Coach Darrell heard it all, but he never replied. He just laced up his old shoes and showed up the next day. One last game. On a cold, rainy Saturday, the school hosted a small local match. Only a few parents came. The field was muddy. The scoreboard didn't matter. But something special happened that day. One player, Jamal, scored a point and ran straight to Coach Darrell. He hugged him and shouted, "This one's for you, Coach." Tears filled Darrell's eyes, not because they scored, but because he saw what they had become. They were no longer broken. They were brothers and sisters. They were a team. The quiet ending. Months later, The board officially ended the sports program. No discussion, no ceremony. Coach Darrell was asked to step down. He packed his things in a cardboard box, left the gym keys on the desk, walked home in silence. No crowd, no farewell speech, just silence. But what no one knew was that the seeds he planted, they were already growing. Back to the present. In the school auditorium, the teacher who introduced him paused and said, "Most people chase medals. He chased hearts." Students turned to look at the old man in the back row. For the first time, they saw him. And for the first time, they stood up. After the sports program was shut down, Coach Darrell quietly disappeared from the school. There was no goodbye party, no awards, not even a thank you letter. The gym doors were locked. The field turned brown. The balls gathered dust, and the school moved on. The town forgot. At first, a few students asked where he went. Some said he moved to another city. Others believed he found a better job. But the truth was harder. Darrell stayed in the same town, in the same small house, walking the same quiet streets. But this time, no one noticed him. The same town that once cheered for him now passed him by like he was invisible. Life after glory. Darrell took a job at a small grocery store. He stocked shelves during the day and worked in the back room at night. Customers didn't recognize him. Teenagers walked past him, laughing, never knowing who he was. Some even complained, "Why is that old man so slow?" But Darrell never said a word. He just smiled and did his work. He didn't have much, but he still gave. Every month, he donated old shoes and used sports gear to shelters. He helped kids in the neighborhood fix their bikes. He cheered for local teams, even when they lost badly. Loneliness and memories. At night, Darrell sat alone in his living room. On the wall hung only one photo, a team picture from years ago. The faces of the kids he once coached stared back at him. Some had moved away. Some had lost contact. Some, he feared, might be in trouble. He often wondered, did it matter? Did I really help anyone? Or did I just waste my only chance at something big? But deep in his heart, he never regretted it. Even without medals or headlines, he still believed in one thing. People matter more than trophies. Whispers of the past. One day, at the grocery store, a young woman walked in. She looked familiar, but older. She walked straight to him and said softly, "Coach Darrell." He turned slowly. His eyes lit up. "Aisha." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "You changed my life. I teach now, because you once taught me to speak up." She hugged him tightly in the middle of the store. People around them stared, confused. But for Darrell, it was the first warm moment in years. A chain reaction. Word spread, quietly at first. One former student posted online, "Remember Coach Darrell? He's working in a store now. We forgot him, but he never forgot us." Another replied, "I'm a firefighter now because of him." Then another, "He stopped me from going down a dark road." Then another, "He made me feel like I mattered when no one else did." The post went viral. People began sharing photos, memories, and thank you messages. Even students who moved overseas wrote long letters. The school finds out. Back at the school, a new principal saw the posts. She didn't know Coach Darrell. She had only heard stories, some good, some vague. But after reading the letters, she made a decision. We need to invite him back. An unexpected call. One quiet afternoon, Darrell's phone rang. He hadn't received a call from the school in over 20 years. The voice on the other side said, "Mr. Darrell Hayes, we're planning a special event. We'd like you to attend as our guest of honor." Darrell was silent for a moment. He looked around his small house, at the old photo on the wall, at the shoes by the door. He whispered, "Are you sure?" The voice replied, "Very sure. Sir, they never forgot you. They just didn't know how to say thank you." The walk back. On the day of the event, Darryl stood in front of the school building once again. The bricks looked the same. The doors felt heavier. The memories flooded back. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. Students rushed past him, busy with their lives. Teachers prepared speeches and decorations. And then someone noticed. A student whispered, "Who's that?" Another replied, "I think that's him, the one from the video." Soon, the auditorium began to fill, not with just students, but parents, teachers, and former students, now grown-ups with jobs and families. They were all there for one reason. And the silence broke. Coach Darryl sat quietly in the front row, unsure of what to expect. Then the lights dimmed. The principal walked up to the stage. She took a deep breath and said, "Today, we celebrate a man who gave everything and asked for nothing." She looked at the crowd and smiled. "Coach Darryl, this day is yours." The silence of 25 years. It finally broke. And what followed was something the town would never forget. For years, Coach Darryl had been the heartbeat of the school. He gave up his fame, his future, and all the glory, just to teach a few forgotten kids how to believe in themselves. But now, the gym was locked. The field was empty. And Coach Darryl was gone. No announcement, no goodbye, no thank you, just silence. They erased him. The school didn't talk about him anymore. The new students never heard his name. The teachers who once worked beside him had retired or moved on. The old trophies still gathered dust in the storage room. His name had faded from the wall where it once stood tall. It was like he had never been there. But to the few students he had once mentored, the silence was painful. The empty days. Darryl now lived in a small rented room at the edge of town. He worked quietly in a grocery store, stacking shelves and unloading boxes. His hands, once strong from training athletes, now shook slightly from age. He never told anyone who he once was, never mentioned his records, never bragged about the lives he touched. People just called him the quiet old man with kind eyes. He walked home alone each night. No spotlight, no crowd, only shadows and memories. A lonely birthday. On his 60th birthday, Darryl bought himself a slice of cake from the bakery. He sat at the park bench with a paper plate, watching kids play on the swings. He smiled gently, but his eyes were distant. "They've all forgotten," he whispered. And deep inside, something began to crack. One former student remembers. That same night, across the country, a young woman named Aisha opened an old box in her closet. Inside was a dusty photo, her high school basketball team. She stared at one man standing in the corner of the picture. Coach Darryl. Aisha had gone on to become a teacher, but she never forgot the man who believed in her when no one else did. She posted the photo online with a simple caption. "He gave up his future to save ours." Does anyone know where Coach Darryl is? The spark spreads. At first, only a few old classmates saw the post. But then, something amazing happened. One by one, people started commenting. "He stopped me from dropping out. Coach taught me how to be a man. I was heading toward jail. He turned me around. He's the reason I became a nurse." Stories poured in, not of victories or trophies, but of lives changed. The post went viral in just 2 days. The world starts asking questions. Local news picked it up. Where is the forgotten hero? What happened to Coach Darryl Hayes? A reporter visited the school. She asked the principal, why isn't his name anywhere? The principal had no answer. She was new. She hadn't even heard of him. But now, everyone was hearing about him. The search begins. Former students searched every corner of the town. Some called every grocery store. Some asked people in the park. Others knocked on doors. And finally, a boy working at the grocery store said, "You mean Mr. Darryl? He works in the back. Really quiet guy." They found him there, carrying boxes, dressed in a faded jacket. His hair was gray. His back was bent. But when he smiled, it was still the same Coach Darrell. Reunion at the register. When Aisha walked into the store, Darrell almost didn't recognize her. But when she said, "Coach, you saved my life," his hands dropped the box he was holding. Tears filled his eyes. And then, others came. One by one, former students walked into that store. Some had babies in their arms. Some wore uniforms. Some held back tears. And they all said the same thing. "You made me who I am." The town wakes up. Suddenly, the town that once ignored him was talking again. People who once mocked his choices were now praising them. The school board, the principal, even the mayor wanted to make things right. The principal sent an official letter. "We want to honor you, Coach Darrell. Please come back. We are ready to listen." The invitation. It had been 25 years since Darrell had stepped into that school. He stood at the edge of the building, holding the letter in his hands. He looked older now, but inside, his heart still beat strong. And as he took a deep breath and walked through those doors, a whisper filled the air. "The champion is back." The letter was simple. No gold seal, no fancy words. Just one page with these lines typed in bold. Asterisk, "Dear Coach Darrell, we are inviting you to be honored at our 50th Annual Founders Assembly. You gave more than any man ever did. Now it's time we finally say thank you." Asterisk. He read it 3 times. His hands trembled. For 25 years, he had been forgotten. Now they were asking him to return, not as a helper, not as a janitor, but as a guest of honor. A torn heart. Coach Darrell sat at his small kitchen table. A cup of cold tea sat untouched. Do they really mean it? What if it's just a show? What if they've changed? So many questions. He looked at the only photo on his wall, the one with his old team. The photo was yellow with age, but the smiles were still strong. He whispered to himself, "If it helps them remember what really matters, I'll go." The journey back. He wore his best shirt, ironed the night before. His shoes were old, but clean. When he stepped out of his house that morning, the sky was cloudy, but his heart felt light. Each step toward the school brought back memories. Shouts of kids on the field, the smell of sweat in the gym, the sound of sneakers against the floor. He had given everything to that place. Now he wondered what it would give back. A surprise at the entrance. When Darrell reached the school gates, he stopped. There were people standing outside, dozens of them. Old students, parents, even former teachers. They weren't inside yet. They were waiting for him. As soon as they saw him, someone shouted, "He's here." And then it happened. Applause. Loud, long, real. Not for a celebrity, not for a rich man, for a quiet coach who had once changed lives without asking for anything in return. Walking through memory. As he walked through the hallway, people clapped and stepped aside. On the walls, new photos hung, of champions, festivals, school plays. But then, on a special new wall, Darrell saw something else. It was titled, "The Coach Who Built Us." There were letters, printed and framed. "He made me believe in myself. He was my first real father figure. I never told him, but he saved me. I was broken. He helped me heal." Darrell stood still. Tears filled his eyes. No one said a word. They just let him feel it. The assembly begins. The auditorium was packed. Students in uniforms, former players, town leaders, reporters. Everyone was waiting. The principal took the stage. She looked around and said, "Every year, we celebrate founders, the ones who build with bricks. But today, we honor someone who built with heart." She looked at Darrell. He gave up his career. He gave up his medals. He gave up his dreams, so that others could find theirs. Then came the letters. A box was brought to the stage. Inside were hundreds of handwritten letters. From students, from children of those students, from people in prison who turned their lives around, from teachers who stayed because of him. The letters were read out loud, one by one. A grown man with scars on his face read his. Coach Darrell, when I stole that ball, and you didn't yell. You said, "You're better than this." That day, I became better. A woman with her daughter on her lap read hers. You gave me strength. You gave me peace. You were the first man who made me feel safe. And then, silence. When the last letter was read, the room fell silent. Darrell stood slowly. He walked up to the microphone. The crowd stood with him. He looked around at faces, old and new. His voice was soft, but clear. I wasn't the best player. I wasn't the smartest teacher. But I showed up, every day. And sometimes, showing up is what saves a life. A new beginning. That day, the school renamed the gym the Darrell Hayes Sports Center. The mayor declared it Coach Darrell Day across the town. Scholarships were created in his name. And a statue was planned, not of him holding a trophy, but of him kneeling beside a student, tying their broken shoe. Because that's who he was. Back home. That night, Darrell sat on the same park bench where he had once eaten a slice of cake alone. This time, dozens of students sat beside him. They laughed. They cried. They thanked him. Again and again. And for the first time in 25 years, he didn't feel forgotten. He felt full. He felt proud. He felt seen. Coach Darrell never asked for rewards. He never wanted fame. All he ever wanted was to make a difference. And now, 25 years later, it was clear. He did. A wave of stories. After the ceremony, something surprising happened. People across the country started talking about Coach Darrell. Former students posted videos. News stations shared his story. Even big athletes and celebrities reposted about the coach who gave everything. But more powerful than the fame were the stories. Stories of broken lives that he helped fix. Stories of people who almost gave up until he showed up. Aisha, the girl who was silent. Aisha had once been a quiet girl with bruises she never explained. She never smiled in class. She never raised her hand. And everyone ignored her until Coach Darrell noticed. He gave her an old basketball and said, "This ball bounces back. You can too." He let her practice alone until she felt safe. He never pushed. He never asked too much. And slowly, she grew stronger. Now she was a teacher. Now she was helping silent girls find their voice. He didn't just teach sports, she told the crowd. He taught me I was worth something. Marcus, the boy with no father. Marcus grew up in the worst part of town. His dad was gone. His brother was in jail. And he was always angry. But Coach Darrell didn't walk away. Even when Marcus skipped practice, even when he shouted bad words, Darrell stayed. One night, Marcus was caught stealing from a shop. The police were called. But before they could take him, Coach Darrell showed up. "Let me handle it," he said. He took Marcus home. He sat him down. And instead of yelling, he said, "I see the good in you, even if no one else does." That was the turning point. Marcus went back to school. He finished college. Now he was a youth counselor, helping boys just like him. "Coach was the father I didn't have," he said with tears. "He saved my life." Elena, the girl who couldn't walk. Elena had a leg injury from birth. She always sat alone during sports. Other coaches ignored her, but not Coach Darrell. One day, he brought her a whistle and said, "You may not run, but you can lead." He trained her to be a junior coach. She learned how to guide others, how to teach, how to motivate. Now she was coaching a team of her own. "He gave me something no one else gave me," she told a reporter. A chance. So many more. Everywhere Darrell went now, people stopped him. A man at the gas station hugged him and said, "You taught me how to breathe when my mom died." A nurse whispered, "You told me I was strong when I thought I was useless." A police officer said, "I almost joined a gang, but you pulled me into the team instead." Even people who had never met him felt inspired by him. He had become more than a coach. He was a quiet legend, one who never asked for glory. Media attention. Soon, his story reached national TV. An interview was arranged. Sitting under bright lights, Coach Darrell looked shy. The host smiled and asked, "Coach, did you ever think your kindness would come back like this?" He chuckled softly. "I didn't do it for kindness. I did it because someone once helped me. I just wanted to pass it on." "A powerful message," the reporter asked. "If you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?" Darrell paused, then said, "Don't quit. Even if no one claps, even if no one sees you, keep giving. Because someday your light will reach someone sitting in the dark." The audience was silent. Then tears. Then thunderous applause. The book and the scholarship. Publishers contacted him. They wanted to write his story, but he didn't want to sell a book. Instead, he said, "Let's write about my students, the real heroes." A book was written. He lifted us, the coach who gave it all. The profits were used to create the Darrell Hayes Hope Fund, a scholarship for kids with big hearts, not big grades. The school changes forever. The school where he once coached was now full of his teachings. A big poster hung in the gym. "Greatness isn't how many trophies you earn. It's how many people you lift." Students started doing volunteer work. Coaches were trained in kindness, not just drills. And every year, a special award was given to the heart of the team. It wasn't always the best player. Sometimes it was the one who helped others the most. Just like Coach Darrell once did. He still walks quietly. Even with all the attention, Darrell stayed the same. He still lived in the same house. Still shopped at the same store. Still walked slowly to the park each evening. But now, when he sat on the bench, he wasn't alone. Someone always came by to say, "You changed my life." And Coach Darrell would smile and reply, "I just saw the light in you. You did the rest." He never asked for applause. He never expected fame. But now, the whole world knew his name. Still, Coach Darrell's favorite place was not a stage or a screen. It was a quiet bench, under an old tree, in the corner of a worn-out park, the place where it all began. Years ago, this was where he sat after quitting his dream, after walking away from the big stadium lights, after saying goodbye to glory, so others could shine. It was here he once cried. It was here he once wondered if he had made a mistake. But now, that bench held peace. Because now, he knew. Visitors from the past. Each day, someone came to visit. A young girl brought her homework and said, "Coach, can you check it like you used to?" An old teammate sat beside him and said, "You should have been the one with the trophy, not me." A woman in a suit came all the way from the city. She was once a scared student, now a leader. She said, "I tell my staff what you once told me. Lead with heart, not with pride." One final letter. One morning, Coach Darrell opened his mailbox and found a letter. It was handwritten. No name, no address. It read, "Dear Coach, you don't know me, but your story changed my life. I was going to quit school. I was going to give up on myself. Then I heard about what you did. You reminded me that the quiet ones can be strong too. Thank you. You saved someone you never met." Tears filled his eyes. He folded the letter slowly and smiled. "That's why I did it," he whispered. "The town that never forgot." Years passed. Coach Darrell grew older. He walked slower now. He spoke softer, but his heart remained strong. The town had changed because of him. The school gym was renamed the Darrell Hayes Center for Hope and Heart. Each year, a new coach was trained under his teachings. Each student learned the story of the man who gave it all. On the walls were painted his favorite words. Greatness isn't what you take. It's what you give. One quiet morning. It was a soft, sunny morning. The birds were singing. The wind was gentle, and the tree above the bench whispered with its leaves. Coach Darrell came, as always, and sat down. This time, he closed his eyes a little longer. He held the photo of his very first team. He wore his lucky shoes, the same ones he had worn for 25 years, and he breathed in deeply, peacefully, a gentle goodbye. Later that day, the children who passed the bench noticed something. Coach Darrell was still sitting there, still holding the photo, still smiling. But this time, he was gone. He had passed away quietly, with no pain, no noise, just peace. The town mourned and celebrated. News spread fast. Tears filled the town. Candles were lit. People came from all over the country. But it wasn't a sad funeral. It was a celebration of a life that had lifted thousands. A parade of students, teachers, athletes, and strangers walked behind his photo. Not in silence, but with stories. Stories of how one man gave up everything to give others something. The final surprise. A week later, a small will was found in his drawer. It said, "If you're reading this, then I've gone to rest. Please don't build a statue. Don't name streets after me. Just keep doing what matters. Help the quiet ones. Believe in the forgotten. And when you sit by the tree, smile, because I'll be sitting with you." The bench today, that bench is still there, under the same tree, next to a simple sign that reads, "Sit here if you believe in someone." Children come to read next to it. Coaches come to think. Elders come to remember. And sometimes, someone places an old, worn-out pair of shoes beneath it, in honor of the man who gave up his glory so they could learn. Coach Darrell had passed on, but his story didn't end at the bench, because sometimes a person plants a seed so deep it keeps growing, even after they're gone. Years later, a new generation, 20 years passed. The gym he once cleaned now echoed with new footsteps. New children laughed. New dreams were being built. But the name Coach Darrell was still spoken in every hallway. A young boy named Jaden sat quietly by the trophy case. He wasn't the fastest. He wasn't the strongest. He didn't talk much. Most kids ignored him. Most teachers didn't notice. But one day, Jaden sat on the bench under the tree. He saw the small sign, "Sit here if you believe in someone." And there, beside the bench, was a small plaque. It read, "To Coach Darrell, the man who taught us that real heroes don't shine. They light the way." A stranger in the crowd, Jaden sat there every day after school. One afternoon, a kind old man with gray hair walked by and asked, "Why do you sit here, son?" Jaden replied, "Because he believed in people like me." The man smiled warmly. "Then maybe it's time someone believes in you." He was the new coach, and he had studied every note, every tape, every lesson Darrell had ever left behind. Jaden finds his fire. With time, Jaden began to change. He didn't become a star overnight, but he began helping others. He stayed after practice. He listened more. And slowly, others followed him. One day, during a school tournament, he dove for a ball, not to score, but to save a teammate from falling. The crowd gasped. His hand was bruised, but his heart was stronger than ever. That night, the coach smiled and said, "You remind me of someone. A new light begins." Jaden grew up. He became a teacher, then a coach, and every time someone struggled, he didn't yell. He didn't give up. He sat with them, talked with them, believed in them, because that's what Darrell did. He even started a club called The Quiet Leaders. It was for kids like him, the ones who were overlooked, the ones who had more heart than noise. Global impact. The Darrell legacy lives on. By now, hundreds of schools in different countries had adopted the Darrell way. Coaching with compassion. Teaching through listening. Building character over competition. There were books written about him. A film was made. But still, his story was told not through screens, but through every student who helped another, every hand held, every quiet voice encouraged, every child believed in.